My name is Stephen Smith. I am the Communications Director for California School Choice Foundation. And I would like to take a brief moment to sort of summarize some of my quick impressions on the speakers that we've heard this evening so far. It was interesting that there was a commonality between the two senators, between the Republican senator and the Democrat senator. Uh, Mr. Morlock talked about uh, a documentary called Waiting for Superman. Waiting for Superman featured the worst 10 schools in the nation, and two of them happened to be in Northeast LA. And I became aware of it when I actually was running for US Congress in that very same neighborhood against Javier Becerra. It was really a tragedy there. Those two schools, one was a junior high and the other was a high school, became known as failure factories. And what was happening in LA Unified, the worst teachers in the district would get passed on to the next school down, and they would all end up in East LA. So those poor kids didn't have a chance. They had the worst teachers in LA Unified, and they became trapped by their zip code because they had no options to get out. They didn't have the money to go to a private or alternate education, and they weren't allowed to commute to other schools where they might have better opportunities. During the course of the documentary, a charter school was open, and there was a great deal of competition to try to get into the charter school. They ended up with a drawing. Parents that got their kids in were ecstatic. Parents that couldn't were devastated. The results were almost immediate. The kids began performing at a much higher level in the charter school than they were in the public school. It's interesting to note today that the high school has lost population to the charter school to the point that now it's a divided campus. There's a line right down the middle of the campus, a fence, and one side is the public school students and the other side is the charter school students. The very same children in the very same neighborhood in the charter school, they're thriving, they're doing wonderfully academically, they're going to college, and the kids on the other side are still trapped by their zip code. That is why we support the idea of school choice. In summary, it's very, very simple. You've heard mentioned Prop 98. This is the principal funding for uh, public schools in the state of California. If you were to take every single student uh, of legal, illegal, race, gender, whatever you want to call it, every single divided person is divided equally the money. So if we do that, divide that money by every single student in the state of California, that's approximately $12,500, maybe going up to $12,600 or $700 next year. We propose that that money be put into an educational savings account that can be spent to pay tuition at the public school. In other words, if you like your public school, you can keep it. It's wonderful. If you want to go to a charter school, a private school, or a parochial school, that money can be invested in terms of tuition at those kinds of schools. And that decision is made by the parents. The money is transferred directly from the account to the school, so there's no trouble with mishandling. And as Corey talked about, this will allow innovation through competition. Basically now, our public schools and the private schools must improve in order to compete for the school dollars. And we've seen that historically works well everywhere that it's been tried. What makes this absolutely unique, rather than doing means testing, as Gloria suggested would be more useful, everybody gets the same shot. We want to be absolutely fair. We feel that mischief can happen when you start trying to make decisions on who should get the money and who didn't, and it becomes a political issue. Our goal is to keep politics totally out of it. As you see, Republicans and Democrats are united on this issue. I think it's very, very important. So the question is, we have heard the problems academically with the schools. We've heard from Brad Dacus, the problems that are happening in terms of some of the sex education issues, some of the indoctrination issues. We've heard from Corey, which gave us a great overview of what's happening with various sex education policies and strategies throughout the country. As you can see, we were blessed to have on this podcast, if you will, webinar, a group of very passionate people, people who are very knowledgeable in their fields, and we all have come to the same conclusion. The question is how do we make it happen? Well, we have decided at California School Choice Foundation that we could only be achieved through the initiative process. It became very, very clear, as Gloria reminded us, it's not going to be happening through legislation. Frankly, if the schools, with the California Department of Education and our legislators wanted to make a difference and make it bigger, or if they could have, they would have. That means it's up to we, the people, to take up the mantle and go forth. And our purpose is to teach you how to do that. And it's doing through the initiative process. We're sort of familiar with that, how that works now with the Recall Newsom. And we'll be sending out an email to everyone that's online and to a number of our other supporters after this, announcing a webinar we'll be having this Tuesday at 7 o'clock. We encourage you to register for that. You can go to our website, californiaschoolchoice.org, go to the interactive pages, click it, you'll see calendar, click it, and you'll see the orientation meeting listed, click it, and you can register to come to that meeting, and we'll teach you what it means to do it the school choice way. It's actually very simple. All we're asking you to do is get 5 people and invite them to our website, get them on our team. So we have built a team in advance prior to putting initiative out in the market that's willing to go out and actually do the work. It's time for a change, and it's time for you to get involved. It only can happen with your help. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to any of our speakers who are still online. I see Corey DeAngelis is still there. Perhaps if our host can switch him over, and if there's any questions, he could answer for us. He's probably seen those on the chat side. If you have chat questions for any of the people that's still with us, please do that now.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I've been communicating in the chat throughout. Thanks for all the questions. I know there was a question about the implications of the Espinoza decision, which is the latest Supreme Court case on school choice. It was based in Montana, but it has nationwide implications. The way that we are interpreting that is that California now has access to school choice despite its Blaine Amendment. If you look at the Institute for Justice website, which I put into the chat, I can add again in a second, but they're saying that all types of educational choice programs are okay. Voucher programs, tax credit scholarships, education savings accounts, you name it, are okay in California despite those Blaine amendments, because they were essentially struck down by the Espinoza decision because those Blaine amendments are so discriminatory and essentially infringes on your First Amendment right to freely exercise your religion and for families to freely exercise their religion by choosing private education. I think there was a couple of other things as well I wanted to hit on. This was brought up about the competition. There are 28 studies on the topic that look at school choice competition on the kids left behind in the public schools. And 26 of those 28 studies find statistically significant positive effects of school choice competition on the kids who don't even use the school choice program, because the public schools start to think a little bit and scratch their head and start to allocate resources more efficiently, and they up their game a little bit. And there's also 5 other studies that look at the effects of the competition on the teacher salaries in the public schools. All 5 of those studies find that the public schools, they start to pay their teachers more because they start, again, allocating their resources towards the classroom instead of on administrative bloat and surges and support staff. And so school choice is good for families, obviously, but it's good for the students who are in the private and the public schools. And then it's also good for the teachers.
Yeah, this is Mike Alexander. This question I would address to Corey and to former Senator Romero here regarding the continued viability of the Blaine Amendment in California. It of course remains the law here, federally or whatever. Does it have any viability? Let's go to ladies first. Ms. Romero, your comments.
Okay, thank you so much. I think certainly that, as we look at it at this new Groundhog Day, that is a guiding star for us, the Espinoza decision. I think it's something that's very tangible, it's exciting, but it didn't emanate from California. So I would be cautious to say that it's applicable in California. If it were, this whole webinar, we wouldn't be talking about an initiative or legislation. It would be the law of the land. I think that's where the movement is right now, is to get the legal interpretation of, is it applicable in California? And if so, how do we get the governor and the legislature to immediately implement the provisions that were found in Espinoza? That's going to be a political battle. That is going to be the big one, a big fight. But to me, that's why I think that the judicial system has the greatest promise for us. Let's look at this. Let's get all the lawyers involved to the interpretation. And if for some reason it is not found to be applicable in California now, today, by next Groundhog Day, then what are the other cases winding their ways to the court that we should seize upon? So let's be, again, there's promise, but there's peril. Espinoza has hope, but it is not decided. Otherwise, like I said, we wouldn't even be having this conversation in this form on this webinar, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm a little more optimistic. I mean, there are other states that have discriminatory school choice programs, like in Maine and Vermont, where you can use the dollars to go to private schools, but not religious schools. So they're already infringing on families' rights. And so Institute for Justice is taking those cases to the courts in those states. The Espinoza decision doesn't say that you have to have a school choice program. What it says is that if you're going to have a school choice program, you can't discriminate against religious families by not allowing the dollars to go to private schools. And so the Institute for Justice has a 50-state map on this. I just put it into the chat. And in California, they're saying that the implications of Espinoza is that doesn't mean that California has to put a school choice law on the books, but they can't prevent it from having access to private educational options. So if you do a ballot initiative like this and the teachers union comes and says, oh, well, we have a Blaine amendment, then that would go to the courts. And if California Supreme Court struck that down, it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they would obviously find that it would be it wouldn't be kosher with the Espinoza decision.
Right.
So this doesn't guarantee you'll have school choice, but